Ka tira ka mihi ki tō tātou kore te kaupapa o tō tō ia mai. E whakakanu hi tātou tātou no ruku ngā tūrangi mau nei tēnā. Ka aroha ki tēni rā e mataloi kōria. I konei mātou i roto i ngā tau te 2007, i konei alo mātou riki pūte āwhitanga te kaupapa. Kai konei alo i tēnei wā. Hale te mea rīpena tātou ana, ngari rīpena tātou ana. Ki ngā taringa tūri nei, roto i ngā tau te kau kimuri. I ngā ringa i hamaingia, i hamai te tuara, i hamai te kano, i runga te mene, i huri tuara mai rātou, ki ngā kranga, ki ngā hie, ki ngā imi o te kāi. A Hokianga nei, mai rāno.
Koe no tēnā koe, tina tēnā tātai. And also was just reflecting back in the year 2007 when the kaupapa, the hapu came together and all the kōrero that took place in that hui fell on deaf ears, and now it's led us to where we are today. Also acknowledging the mamai that's within this room, within the whānau, and that's mamai that's carried on from generation to generation, and it's been reflected today.
Tā mātou kaupapa I taua tae mai, te mea I taua wā, o te kaunera, o te taitoke rau, o te raki, ka tonoa, ki tēne, o te hete, kaunera tērā?
Ai, ko whānau district.
O no, ko tēne ngā kaunera nei ka tono, ki te rau ngā kaunera, ki whakae mai, ki te reihanga, ko I teri te pampu wai tiko nei, ki roti te Hokianga, I te wāhi, ko aro he te ingoa, wai aro he te wāhira, he ara ko porori, ko wai aro he ke. Nā, I reira mātou ka maranga mātou, o mātou hapu karangatanga o te kāinga roto te wahapu Hokianga, mātou morai. Ka otia mātou te hana te tahi pukapuka. He pukapuka tēnei, hei whakaako, he pukapuka tēnei, hei paihire I te tuatahi. Take ka hua ki tēngua, ka hukura. Ke iki ke katoa tākuatanga te tirohanga, ki tāo katoa noho nei tāo te tangata ki roto. Hara te mea ka noho, te tuanui o ngā kaunui hirau. Hara te mea ka noho ki raro te tuanui o te kāwanatanga, ngari te tuanui nui nei ko ragi nui nei.
Kia ora, and so just reflecting back on that kōrero, those years ago, the Far North District Council actually put in a submission to the North Regional Council, and we took place at that time, and what Matua presented there was a booklet that was constructed by the hapu of Hokianga, and it was a holistic approach, not just Western science, but also an approach by hapu in terms of everything around how we can best look after our environment, and the point at that time was around the waste that was being discharged into our way.
Ka mutu, I tū te hui, tēnei hui nei, na ki te hōtera, ki o māpere, ngare ki hei tatu, tahi kākaue, ki te kōti whenua. Te kōti taio? Nā, I kiri mā te hui ai. I reira ka tatu, ko te kaupapa, te tikanga, ka waihua, te kautau, e hana ko te pāte kautau. Ki te kaunehera, kia mahitahi ki Hokianga, ki ona piringa katoa, hau ngā noa māte ngā mea noho tangata pinu, noho hunga kāinga, na ki roti te wahapu. Ki whakatika hia, I tāwhatanga, nā, ki te wai paru nei, ki te wai kino nei. Mai taua tāma ki tēnei wā. Kohi pue huni, pene te mene he tūpāpuku kewe nei tuhinga. Aloha pai ne, ka tika tā tātou kōturo ke peke kinu I te mea, I hia koituru. I hia koituru roto I ngā tau ki muri nei.
And so, reflecting back to that hui that took place, another hui actually took place in Keri, and there was a 10-year plan put in place in regards to how the council could build relationships, consult with hapu, but during that 10 years, it's quite evident that nothing's been done, and moving on 10 years later, we've reached this point, that it's 10 years gone, it's kind of arisen this thing that people need to take action now.
Mutu ko te pātai ia, na ki ngā tahe irua, hei a koutou tēnei pukapuka, ni roto a koutou whaere te wane.
And so the question is, have you read, seen this book within your guys' workings?
Could you read the title?
Te kahukura, te te kahukura, a Ngāti Korokoro, Ngāti Pālara, te pauka, ngā hapu o te wahapu o te Hokianga nui a kupe.
Ia ki tā rātou pōkita, they've seen that.
Nā, ko te klanga nui kei roto, tō tāti paiheretanga i a tātou. A he tāti mahitahi ai.
Yeah, and the main purpose of that document there, of that book there that's been put together is about how we can work together, how we can build a relationship and a partnership.
Ka miti te tāme tuhi tēnei pukapuka ko pahure te kaumaharani tau. Nō reira, ko hau anō tēnei wānei ne, ngā tāmaki muri nei ne. Nō reira, hei nui ke ngā mea hau kei mua i tō tāte ororo. Hei whakaora ke i te kaupapa hui hui nei tāte tēnei wa. Ko te tahi.
So that book was done 10 years ago, and obviously in 10 years a lot have changed. And so there's a lot of new things that need to be put in place and addressed.
Ko te hia, kura hakamutinga tēnei. Whakamana hia tō koi te wahiretanga. Whakamahana hia, whakanui hia tō koi tō tātei tānetanga, ne? I roto, i ngā toka rua nei, e rua ke ngā mumokanohi, e pā ke ngā taringa, e hia ke ngā wairunga ngā kau, ko ti tāti ta whakaora, ārunga, o e te warangi nui tū nei, te papapena takota. Ahua tu ki awa rāua tamne ko rāua uri, anei tātu ka tātu, he uri mokopuna. No rāua katoa, no rātu katoa, ne?
So we're all descendants of Whanginui, the Sky Father, of Rawene, the Earth Mother, and about acknowledging, respecting and enhancing the mana of the female and the male, and in that we can find a solution for the greater good.
I te mea i haere koutou ki te tiro i ngā wāhi e rua, ne? I tai koutou ki waiaro hi na nahi nei, e na pēreira tō mā te kaumata o kohonei kai asa ki reira ia? Nai, te me reira koutou na nahi nei tiro haerana, ne? I rungo koe te tapu i te rawāhi?
So what was to say that yesterday you the commissioners went on the site visit, and did you feel the sacredness within that place? Aloha mai motokaria i tai atu.
I rogo koutou te karanga, tau e ta mamai, te kākahu tare nei.
And so when you get on that visit, did you feel the home within the land and the whenua and tare is reflected on like eating or the other things?
Mea kāroha ki a koura, here te mea wira ni a koura. Ngare ko ia te roko tama mai ke roto i te kāinga nei, mai anō, ne? Nena ko koura ko te rongoa, hei oranga mōku mo mātou i tēnei taha nei, tiki nātu. Hanga hia tau o rongoa, anei ngā ringaringa hei āwhi nātu i āwhi, anei ngā reo hei āwhi nātu i āwhi, anei ngā tuara, ngā ringaringa, ngā wāwai, hei āwhi nātu, te whakaora, te taha ki te mona, ki tai, te whakaora no te taha ki uta ki te whenua.
Lots of us just stating that this is not directly targeted at our commissioners. I know that finds that if the solution is within use or the answers is within use, that there's people here to support their kaupapa and their cause. And like you said, there's a strapping young man next to him with a strong back and big shoulders that is more than capable of helping.
Nā, me tēnei taha, nā, ko te taha tēnei kia hine. Taua mana rāno, taua mauri rāno. E kore o tia kouti te mea kei tāwahi kei kouti nohoana. Ko mātira kei te kāinga, ko mātenga mea mātuana, e aha kei te kāinga, e aha kei roto mātou rikarika. Kei te mate ne, te ao. Kei te mate. Kaua tātou mea, i nā ka piwa te Hokianga, ka piwa rāni, tō tātou mutu ki te tai aitua tanga nui, kia kaua tātou mea, nāwe āwhine te raitua kia tāma. Nāku te raitua i klangu. Kaua.
So he's just that's how reflected on your male. He also acknowledged taha of te wahine, the female, and acknowledging that too, and that that Hokianga and that haroha mai. Haroha ngā kōrero mota.
But just saying that there's more evil stuff to come, ne? And we must not klanga I masngar pakarite. Take e haere mai na tau ngara. E zen ngā mate nei, ngā hau mate nei, ka mate tamari ki ngā tangata e ra mea katoni, Nore ka mihi ki ngā kauni hira. I te mea, nā koe te pakatakoto ko ngā paipa nei, ne? Nā ku pakaki ngā paipa. Te kōrero ia, me pehe toa tātou, ne tiaki. Ta taha ki ta paipa ka mute me ngā paru anoa le reana, e tau ati ki te Hokianga, me u ki te pēnui te tuatahi. Kia kōpui tero te pēnui, kia whānau hau anu te rawai.
So he's acknowledging the councils that they laid the pipes and we filled the pipes, but let's find the solution and how we can, that waste or discharge doesn't go into the water, that it's filtered through the land.
Nā tira. Nā, ka muti tāna kōrero ka wai kare ke te nita.
Tēnā rā tātou katoa ko Jesse McBain tōku ingoa no Hokianga hau. Nā nui ki a koe mātua honi, te katoa, te kone, te tipu. I just thought I'd give you a quick, brief introduction of myself, so you know where I'm coming from. My background is in education and conservation for the last 25 years. I've worked for DOC, I've worked alongside doing contracts for and with Northland Regional Council, with kura hapu iwi and community in Hokianga and other parts of the country and the world. I'm a trustee on Haura Hokianga Health Enterprise Trust, which is a Māori health organisation. That organisation interweaves mātauranga Māori tikanga alongside Western science without being forced to by the courts. I'm a representative for South Hokianga on the Kaikoe Hokianga Community Board within the Whanau District Council, alongside councillors such as Tāmati Rākina, Hilda Harawira, Moko Te Pania, Kelly Stratford, and many other people who support this kaupapa. I am a founding member of Te Māori Te Wai, which you heard mentioned before, and you will hear more from later on during this week. We, as Te Māori Te Wai, became the community-led community liaison group for the Rawene system, and we have been working collaboratively. That's a hapu-led group. We've been working collaboratively to actually fight and sometimes work along council to restore the harbour. Almost 15 years gone by now. In my lifetime, I've seen the depletion and degradation and the falling away of a way of life in Hokianga. We're well aware that there are many things destroying this precious taonga, not just the wastewater, but originally probably the deforestation that came when Europeans arrived, continued with the forestry that causes sedimentation, siltation, land use practices including farm runoff, stormwater from our roads and our towns and other urban runoff. So it's not just tutai that is killing this harbour, but this is the only one that we get a chance to feed into around a resource consent, and human waste is the most abhorrent to probably all of us, in particular to tangata whenua. And let's remember, when we're measuring the waste that's coming from these plants, it's not just E. coli, suspended solids and all of those other things. It contains microplastics, it contains residues from drugs and medications, there are viruses, there are algae, and none of these things are removed by the pond treatment systems, and not much is removed when we have the heavy rains like we've experienced this year, and probably expect to experience a lot more in the future. Collectively, across Hokianga, we're working on all of the aspects of restoration, and Justin spoke to some of that earlier. There have been millions of dollars put into this kind of mahi across Hokianga, and that will continue from above Lake Omakuri and the entire catchment. I personally, I would estimate over the last 15 years, have probably spent thousands of hours in hui with hapu, iwi, community groups, council staff, elected members, 3 different mayors, council CEOs, Northland Regional Council and their elected members, and ministers including Nanaia Mahuta and scientists of many sorts, and listen to many tōhunga in tikanga as well. I'll cut some of it short because a lot of it's been said before me, but let us not forget that Hokianga Harbour is a taonga of international significance. Not only is it heartfelt by all of us here, in particular to those people who whakapapata here, but this is an internationally significant place, and that is confirmed, what we know in reports such as the DOC report and Dr. Bellingham, who look at the ecological values, fish breeding grounds, salt marshes, bird habitat, and so on. We must also remember that the waters used to be pristine. Before Europeans came here, these waters were pristine. Even the old people that I grew up around listening to said that there were white sands all the way up, at least to the Narrows, possibly further, but I know that that's what I've been told. I've also had the privilege of sitting in many hui from a very young age and listening to different tikanga knowledge, but it's fundamental tikanga that you've all been told you never put human paru into the wai, especially not where you swim and eat from. That's just fundamental. So removing wastewater discharge is essential to restoring the Hokianga and being part of the healing of the people through rebuilding cultural practices, and this should become an ongoing piece of reinstating hapu tino rangatiratanga. Sarah earlier spoke about te tiriti o Waitangi, and that wastewater going into the water is of the highest offence. So when I hear comments such as perhaps the Māori isn't considered important in the courts if Western science says that the environment being harmed, I'm flabbergasted, because no doubt that will be tested in courts under treaty legislation. The principles of te tiriti o Waitangi guarantee, as has been said many times, tino rangatiratanga. It requires good faith, partnership, reciprocity, active protection, equity and participation. This fundamental, foundational basis of this nation of Aotearoa requires us to work in good faith, and the RMA requires us to do this, requires you to do this, with the utmost effort and diligence. In the many hui that I've been in attendance to, there's always not enough money. Not enough money for alternative systems, not enough money to do testing, not enough money for all sorts of things. However, there always seems to be enough money for lawyers, 3 years of a lawyer on retainer against te Māori o te Wai, and enough money for another scientist to come and do another report to tell us that what you're doing is okay. I am very fascinated to hear some of the kōrero coming from the commissioners in a very appreciative way, particularly you, Sharon. You mentioned composting toilets, you mentioned stormwater, you mentioned ingress, and septic tanks coming from septage coming from Kuhuku to Rawene. These are all conversations that Te Māori to Wai have had over the years. We're told we can't have composting toilets because of the investment in the reticulation system requires council to hook more people up to a system that doesn't work. We're told that the smoke test in the stormwater is too expensive for us. We're told that other places don't accept septic, so Rawene has to take it. Now I know we're talking about the other septic, the other wastewater treatment plants. However, we're getting it from Kohukohu, and it comes and it causes our plant here to pollute the harbour because it's not designed to take it. So that whole system is just doesn't work. You're just shifting one problem to another place. We have asked council staff to support us in any way to find other funding. We recognise this could be a problem around rates rise. We don't want that for anybody. We've asked for Tourism Infrastructure Fund that we know other places get. We're told no. Several years ago, I suggested that Three Waters might help us and that we would put in for money for that. I get told, no, that won't help. Now I read that for Upanuni, for the stage 2, that's relying on funding from the Affordable Waters Reform, which is quite interesting. So some of the other comments that I just want you to really know how obstructive this council has been for us over this last 14 years at least, and before that, but my mum will speak to that. So staff have said to me, how do you know that the discharge isn't actually improving the quality of the harbour? We're told that we can't get the kaimoana actually tested, it's just going to be a modelling. When they did actually test it, because we pushed so hard, they tested the kaimoana so far away, or the water so far away from the discharge that it didn't mean anything. They also did actually facilitate some kaimoana testing. A lot of those places we knew didn't even have kaimoana. We could have told them where to go if people felt like sharing those places to be tested. Now I used to work for DOC. I've done a fair bit of monitoring. I worked with a DOC staff member to do that testing on kaimoana just down here. We did it really carefully. That particular sample came back so polluted that they said we must have messed up the testing or else contaminated it deliberately. At that stage, they were saying that Kaikohe did not charge to the Hokianga harbour. We kept looking on maps and fighting and proving to them actually it does. The Wairoro, the unnamed tributary, flows to the Wairoro, Punakitere, Waima, Tahike Waima, and out here where we tested the oysters. They discounted our findings because they thought we had messed up. We didn't. When I sat in the meetings and they talked about why Upanuni wasn't functioning well, and they were talking about the stock getting in, they laughed at me when I said fence it out. It was too hard because there were wild stock that the fences wouldn't keep out. I suggested they get somebody to shoot the wild stock. People around here do that all the time. And I was laughed at. I'm really glad to see they put that fence in now. I had a little chuckle with my mate Tommy about that. At that time, this may be 5 years ago, some of the staff will remember these meetings, I suggested that perhaps planting the wetlands, replanting them in a way that would work, might be a good idea. And they first said that the pukekos keep pulling out the raupo. And I said, well, figure that out. And then they said, actually, our staff are too old and their knees don't work. I said, get new staff. They said, nobody wants to work for us. It's demeaning. This isn't treaty obligations. This is demeaning to us. It's not a joke. These things happen to me and to many others, no doubt. About 5 years ago, we were told that the Upanuni plant didn't have a maintenance plan, but that was about 30 years into the system, but they were going to put a maintenance plan in. Monday, I hear that they're still working on the maintenance plan. Hopefully that will happen soon. We had data put into the conditions of the Resource Management Act for Rawene. Many times that data wasn't collected and we didn't get it. Apparently there's not enough staff. To get the cultural impact assessment written, we encouraged as many whānau hapu marae to inform council that they were interested parties, because apparently it's up to the authority, the consent authority or with the applicant, that they decide who's interested or not. So people let them know that they were interested. When we got the CIA, I was surprised to see that within one of the recommendations was to update the address list for marae and hapu contacts. So that they needed a CIA to be told how to contact the right people. Now they only need to come to one hapu to ask who would be the right people to contact. And I think there's probably a list on TPK website too. So these things are not hard to do. The effort has not been put in. We petitioned and took a huge ope of beautiful tamariki and others, including our kaumātua matua honi, to NRC and sat in front of the sat because they didn't have enough chairs, to try to ensure that this hearing would be publicly notified. We marched at Waitangi in 2019. 2,000 people were marching for Hokianga to be clean from wastewater. There's been a total lack of engagement and importance given to this taonga. I haven't finished, sorry. Just have a moment. This is 15 years of mamai for me, 44 for my mum, and hundreds for the people sitting in this room, including Otinga. Kia ora. Even the documents presented that you've read show a lack of serious dedication from our councils to uphold treaty principles. Some of that might be not easy to recognise, but the application for the Opunoni wastewater treatment plant has a beautiful quote from one of our kaumātua in here about the importance of keeping paru out of the way. That staff member wrote that application and summed it up as the cultural effect would be less than minor. That is a tick box, disingenuous move if ever I saw one. It also goes on to say, Te runa no te raro, should they express an interest in discussing the effects of the activities on cultural values, if NDC is willing and able to undertake this consultation. So, think that one through. You can ask me questions about what that might mean. In the documentation, they said that Te Rarawa had been represented in the Opunoni Community Liaison Group. They named the kaumātua on that. I know him. He was the same guy who tested teal with me down here. I asked him, were you in that group? I never saw you. No, he didn't even know his name was on it, and he certainly never went to a meeting. They named him, he wasn't there. This disingenuous attempt at minimising the cultural impact, this tick box exercise, is misleading. And the worst thing is, it's a basis for legal and other documents, which there are people in this room that have been using false information because you didn't know. Other people will talk about the statutory acknowledgements. And right or wrong, I don't have opinion about who should or shouldn't have those in what places. It's not my business. But it looks like whoever put them in those applications did a quick internet browse and then got it wrong. They mixed up the names of the iwi, and this is not typos. This is not a matter of using unfamiliar names. If you're employed by our local government to do this kind of mahi that will become legally binding, you need to know in whose area you are in. You need to understand what that means at even a basic level, and to mix up the names and then put them into reports that potentially can go into law is not due diligence. Many more people will talk to this, but the copy and paste that has been suggested of who should be involved in the potential, if any, liaison groups lacks the major hapu. They're the largest hapu in the country, actually, are not even included. Ngāhui, if people didn't know, some of you don't seem to. So As said before, the hapu of Ngāpuhi have never ceded sovereignty, they never gave up their treaty rights, and this is another breach. Staff who are in vital decision-making roles and who do not have the cultural competency are being put into positions, and aroha mai, this is actually not entirely your fault, and I've told you this isn't personal, but you are in positions that are dealing with treaty issues that you obviously have no understanding about and will end up potentially in binding legal situations. It is an absolute failure on the behalf of the council that I happen to be a part of. It creates a flimsy house of cards that goes in. You know, the reports that you're getting are getting the wrong names of hapu, the wrong names of iwi. So going forward, how can you make recommendations? It's beyond belief in some ways. I don't need to really talk about the provision of relationship of Māori to their waters, and there'll be many people who have the ability to do that far better than I can. But kaitiakitanga cannot be decided by council staff. You don't even understand it from what I can see, and you can't avoid, mitigate or remedy it by including people in the practices that are culturally offensive. The only people that can talk about that are the people who have the knowledge of that, and some of these people are in the room. So the only way, from what I have been told, the only way to mitigate that cultural impact is putting the discharge to land and having zero human waste to water, as said before and for decades. So there's a lack of serious effort also to seek alternative treatment and discharge options. They're all desktop surveys, assumptions, generalisations, common practice, copy and paste with mistakes, dodgy comparisons and untenable solutions and misunderstanding. Minimising language all goes to justify the status quo and excuse poor performance and diminish the importance of these consents. This is a taonga of international significance. It is being breached, it is being badly treated, it's a treaty issue, it needs to be taken seriously. One of the things that I find very strange is the way that they compare the results of water monitoring between Utukura Awa, which flows out of Lake Omapere, as all of you must really know, and they compare that with the discharge of Kohukohu wastewater treatment plant. Those discharge results are tested after mixed in the receiving environment, whichever you define that to be. But the Utukura is freshwater awa. I'd really like to see the map of where that was tested, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't tested in the harbour. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that. But you probably cannot compare what is in the Utukura River and call it the upper harbour and compare the results and say that that is 3,000 times worse than what's coming out of that wastewater treatment plant. Now, we know it's paru coming out of the Lake Omapere, we know that. It's strange to me also that the consents in that area are managed by NRC for the entire catchment of that lake. So there's some responsibility from the regional council to the quality of the water coming out of that lake. And I imagine really that why they use that data, it was easily available on the internet, rather than actually testing somewhere much closer within the harbour, in the mixing environment above the discharge station. In any case, if the harbour is polluted, there is no justification. How can that possibly be a justification to put more contaminants in it? It makes no sense. We don't want to maintain the poor, degraded quality. We want to heal the Hokianga, and we actually think it's your responsibility to improve the water quality, not add to it just because it's less than what you perceive to be further up the Awa. It's strange to me to see that both WWTPs, and I think this is a copy and paste from every application I've ever seen, provides for economic, social, health and safety values. They took cultural out of that in the last wee while I saw, because they can't say that. But what they're doing, what they're saying, and what staff have said to me over many years is, well, it used to be worse, it could be worse, so what we have now is a positive effect. I'm sorry, there's better systems, there's better ways, that is not okay. That's the 1980s attitude. I heard Mr. Gordon over here, the operating staff member over here, saying that for the Kohukohu WWTP wouldn't be built now. Well, we don't want it now. We deserve better. Hokianga deserves better. And in the applications and the responses that talk about, I will wait until we have to address climate breakdown, seems to me ridiculous. This is happening faster than even the report suggested, climate breakdown, and waiting around for it. Who does that? I don't let my son wait around for something bad to happen before he acts. So actually the council is obligated to put in mitigation and adaptation members. These policies will be enacted soon. So what are we trying to quickly get this resources consent across before you actually have to address, having these wastewater treatment plants at basically sea level? It's not clever. The other thing is that every spike and every non-compliance might look like a little bump on a chart to you, but it's detrimental to us. And I've had people coming up to me even today saying, oh, when my son went swimming, he got impetigo from swimming in that river. That's hurtful. People telling me, when I took my kids swimming, one mouthful of water and they were sick. Now I work at the hospital. I ask them if they collect this data. They don't. Nobody's collecting who's getting sick from eating our kaimwana or swimming. Nobody's measuring that. So I'd be interested, really, if that did happen, and see those results. When I hear that our beaches don't close, well, that's true. What they do is they put up signs saying, don't eat shellfish, don't swim here. And also there's a general recommendation in our harbour, do not swim 5 days after it rains. If you actually follow that, we wouldn't have had a swim this year. Tika ne. So there's a little bit of language used here that I find misleading. There's some assumptions too in those reports that our population's actually going to decrease, but if we actually get any more population, then that's going to be B&Bs, because you looked at some database. What we know is that we've had a huge influx of people come back from returning home after the COVID experience. We suffer a housing crisis here. We need to be able to house our own people. We need to be able to connect them to systems that work. They're not going to be B&Bs, and if they were, those manuhiri like a clean harbour as well. The main thing probably comes down to that there was never a proper investigation. Desktop investigations didn't work. They didn't come up with anything. But what I know is if a serious effort is looked at finding alternatives, then there will be solutions. I can speak from experience. So the Rawene and Kaikui and Taipa systems are now used by FNDC as examples of how they're making serious efforts at looking at land-based systems. What I know for sure is that at least 2 of those came out of Environment Court forcing the council to do so. The other one, that's Taipa and Rawene. With Kaikohe, what I know is the council went to Hapu and consulted in the way that they do and said, this is what we want to do. And the strength of the Hapu said, that's not happening. So they formed a working group, which you heard about some of the values in terms of reference, which is something to be really proud of. It's true. And so when forced, the council can do this. The other thing that I want to say about that is for Rawene, VK Consultants, who are one of the ones who did the plans, and all of the plans end up with the same, there's no viable alternatives for Opanoni, for Kohukohu. There were no viable alternatives for Rawene. 0 places due to our topography, our soils, our weather. and the volume or whatever, the type of discharge. So when we did go to Environment Court mediation and set our own terms of reference as hapu led, then suddenly we get an engineering company, Becca, who walked around on the ground with us, and they found 7 places that were suitable. 7 from 0. They also found a number of different treatment options. Some of them were affordable, and not just electrocoagulation that we've been looking into, because that came from our expert in Environment Court. He came, he searched a bunch of options for us. That was simply our preferred option. There's more than that available. So when I hear there's no alternative places because of these reasons, I've heard it before. It was funny how that changed when forced. I actually have to give credit here to our FNDC staff, because when we did have the option of backdoor quickly getting some better off funding, because council actually tried to just shift the better off funding that they were going to receive from Three Waters into existing projects such as footpaths and things like that. And then I have to give credit to Whaihuhanas here that they stopped that. They gave them a few more months to find, for council to find projects that were hapu priorities. And so I do give full credit to our staff member who helped us put that report together for the Better Off Fund. That was approved. And as soon as we got money for Rawene, suddenly we can have electrocoagulation. Sorry if that was a surprise, but that is going in. And Taipa, that will be going in. That's going in before the end of the year. So from fighting us on this, they're putting in 2 systems in this year. That's just one option that was possible. So when I hear, oh, we can come back and improve the systems if the technology becomes available and so on, and we'll deal with climate change later on, I don't trust the council to do anything unless legally required by very tight laws, very tight conditions and terms of reference. So you ask us for what that might look like. For me, that's a 3-year consent maximum with milestones built into that council are required to achieve. That would be a group set not by council and chosen by council, but chosen by hapu iwi community or Hokianga. I won't say who that could be, I don't know, and it's not up to me to say. But many of our experienced kaumātua and kuia here have told me it is possible for people to work together and set their own terms of reference, and indeed I've seen this happening. So those terms of reference would be set by that group to work and guide council who have expertise. Believe me, I do. I know that. But there is nobody more motivated to find solutions than the people who whakapapa, who live and who love this harbour. Let us do it. Let us get the new technology. Let us get the funding that is or potentially becoming available. Let us deal with climate change before we are forced to. That's probably it. Kia ora.
No questions for you. I don't think you left the stone unturned there. I can see the decades have gone into your speech today and where you've got to. So all I can say is we really do appreciate the time that you've come to say all these things once again from your side of the table, but for the first time for our ears. And we appreciate that you're feeling tired, worn down and frustrated. So all I can say is kia ora and kia kaha, and we appreciate you standing up as being heard.
Ka mihi katoa mātou ki a koe Sharon, mataroa ia, ki a koe kara, ki te katoa e hui nei. Tēnei rā ko tēnei rā ina nahi nei, a pōpō, e rā rangatira, e karanga mai e te tāhi ane ki a tātou nei. Ko ia tēnei ko te mauri o tēnei rā, te mauri tēnei kaupapa hikina, ka hiki nā ko te hau ota, ka hiki nā ko te hau taurekarikatanga, ka hiki nā ro tama maitanga ki runga, ki tēni whakatupulanga e hui nei, e piri nei. E piri nei ki roti te hāmano ora, ki roti ki tēnei whare. E piri nei ki roti te taurei here te whakapapa, heke mai te rangi rāno ki runga pēnu e takoto nei. A nei rā ko ngā taurā, nei rā ko ngā pia, ia huahu mai, i roti ngā take, ngā tātai ariki, ngā tātai atua. E tau nei te mauri, ora nei te mauri e piti nei, o te wairoa tau, te manawa ora, te pūmanawa ki roti nei taura, kaeki, mea ke ki te piti ngota rā, mea ke ki tua te piti ngota rā, tū mai te toki a hau mea hui, nā koutou, ngā rātia.
to be streamed or not. It's up to you.
It's okay.
Yeah? Kia ora. I'll leave it on.
I was born here in the Rawene, way back when that crazy fish arrived here, called over the dolphin. So I've been around for a little while. The Hokianga is still o Mate, whare o taku Kali Mama, so still here. No reira, te mea tuataki mā kuki te whakapetai ki tō tātou matune te rangi. I kore hau tō tātou matune te rangi, hi kore tātou. Ni hata ki ngā wakamaha, te hopia ma whakapau karakia, ko umai nei, no mai hare mai, I raro te tua nui o tēne o tātou whare, I raro hoki te kaupapa o te rā. I atu ki a rātou ko hure atu ki tua o te arai hae koutou. Aho kou pehea mātou korora mātou mihi kore koutou, hoki mai kia mātou, I ngare ko mātou tōna wāwhai atu. Muri a koutou tōrona, koutou tata hai atu. Bit of housekeeping first, Sharon. I've got here my form 13, which is a submission form. And I just want to go to Section 8, there's some fine print that if we choose to elect to have this case heard before the commissioners, if you tick the box above, you will be required to contribute to the costs of the hearing commissioners. So, unless you see me later on, I've got to IOU for you. part of my submission, Madam Chair, is talking about the concept of rahui, and secretly hoping that it didn't have to come to that. But I'll read a couple of the lines that were in that submission. The customary practice of rahui by Kaitiakitanga was to restrict access to or use of an area or resource for the purposes of spiritual and physical well-being of hapu and whānau in that area. The mixing of any form of human waste with a food source is cultural anathema. The degradation of rivers, streams and oceans is an affront to responsible kaitiakitanga. Kaitiakitanga implies responsibility to generations yet born, and not only to those living in the here and now. Kaitiakitanga implies being beholden to those who have gone before, and to think and act in a continuum of good faith, care and responsibility. The resource consent application by the Whānau District Council to the Northern Regional Council to continue to discharge human waste into Hokianga Harbour goes against all forms of responsible kaitiakitanga. Both the Declaration of Independence 1835 and the Treaty of Waitangi 1840 recognise Indigenous rights as regards forests and waterways, otherwise known or classified as taonga. And I just wanted to raise the issue of, when I find it, Cultural Health Index. And I looked for a definition because I didn't know quite what that was, and I found this. A culture of health is broadly defined as one in which good health and well-being flourish across geographic, demographic and social sectors, fostering healthy, equitable communities, and guides public and private decision-making. And everyone has the opportunity to make choices that lead to healthy lifestyles. I want to tell you a little story. So my sister's daughter, Kelly, gave evidence yesterday. Kelly's with the Rawene school there here yesterday. And Kelly's son, Taniora, was sitting next to me back here. And we had Matua Marcus Rogers came up and gave his corridor before we started. And he was quite vocal. And had his props with the toilet paper and all that. Was really pretty cool. But he used that SH word several times, you might recall. And up here originally, when we wanted to emphasize that SH word, we put an E in there, you know, to really get some emphasis on that four-letter word. And anyway, Tamiura turned to me later on and he said, Papa Lance, why does he talk so hard? I thought, that's a strange question. I kind of left it there. But that was his way of asking that question. Why does he talk so hard? And so this morning at precisely 1:47, the Māori woke me up in my bed, and I thought about that part of that question. Why do people talk so hard? And when do they talk hard? And I might suggest they talk hard when they're not being listened to. And so what happened at Waitangi? Was it a civil contract between two people, or was it the building of a relationship? And what is the essence of relationship building? It's to form trust. And so we've heard that today from Justin. Because when you have trust, you can move forward. And without trust, you talk hard. You have issues. And eventually you walk away. In this community, as you would have gathered by now, there's a massive amount of ability, natural talent. And if you ask the people here, they will give you the answers to whatever you want. He aha te mea nui, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing? Ka hore, people say it's the people, but here is singular, right? What is the most important thing? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. The divine sovereign individual. Because within each of those people, you will find the answers to almost any problem you might have. It's there. You've seen it on display here this morning. If you ask them, you'll find the answers. And this is a challenge. Rawene, kia ora to your team. Challenge to you to work out a way to talk with us. All right? That's where it is. That's where we build trust. When we talk to each other and we come up with the solutions. So that's my challenge to you. Other than to end with this, I might give you what we would consider desirable outcomes from this, Sharon. Number one, to request consistent and effective testing of the waters and a testing regime. For the Council to immediately carry out the proposed improvements and upgrades to the systems as they are. A 3-year term subject to meaningful KPIs. I printed some t-shirts and I've got one for each of you. Bribes sometimes go a long way. But on those t-shirts, it has the emblazoned Karanga Hokianga. So the Hokianga is calling to us, and we will respond. That's the question. So nō reira, and we have a famous song just down the road here, Sharon. His name is Willie Horner. And we played with herbs. And they had this way up there called Listen. And I'm going to play it for me now. So, the challenge to us, are we listening? Are we listening to the call that we have on us today?
Trying to tempt them up to do a bit of cunny here. Share the love. Here we go. Okay, enough cunny fun.
And if you're serious about the t-shirt, I'm sure you've underestimated our size. We look much smaller than we really are.
You're probably going to be one size up after Hoya was really nice catering out the back by the end of this week.
That's right.
Kia ora to the whānau Henua, the lands, for looking after us here. Pai anō koutou mai. If I've got something to bring, how about bring a kohara if you want to bring that. But you know, the old saying with this whānau living lands made life
Thank you very much. And again, I really appreciate looking forward and giving us that feedback, so thank you for that. The next speakers I have on the list is Mr. Birch. Welcome, Mr. Birch.
mind, I'll stand.
That's okay too, whatever's comfortable.
Kuna kati ake māku ti hei mauri ora. Tuatahi rā e mihi ana rā ki a koutou ngā manuhiri. Aurua, kumihana, kai kumihana, ai no ki a koe raunga, Patarorea, mihi ana rā ki te kaurikera ārohe, kāwanatanga ārohe, mihi ana hoki ki a koutou FNDC. Ona ki a rere tonu rā ko te mihi, te haukainga, te hāpuri ki ngā hapu, ko tau mai nei, te rānei, o ti rā rātou i tau mai rā i te mane, ina nahi tātou i tēnei rā. Mihi ana ki ngā mihi, tautau ana ngā mihi, i puta rā, i taua rā, i te pōhuritanga, i whakatauri ai te kaupapa ki roto i te whare nei, no reira ka mihi tonu. Wena, kowai tēnei e tuake nei. E hara mai nei e hau, ko te reo kōrero, te kai kōrero o te hapu o te uri kōpura. Hara mai mātou i roto o mangamuka. Te kai kōrero hoki e hau mo te whānau pāti o Motu Kiore, mo te hāpanga. Tērā wāhi e mōhio whānau i tia e koutou ko te Narrows. I reira tō mātou kāinga, tō mātou whenua o mātou mahi ngā kai. Mahi ngā aika, mahi ngā kai kei reira. Tērā wāhi e puta mai ai te tiko i roto o tērā wāhi o te kohukohita. Nu reira kuia rā kua hau e tuake nei ko hoe pataipari pāti tongu inga. Me timata kihia. Ka mihi atu rā hau ki ngā momotake i puta mai i roto i ngā kai kōreru tuake i mui aha. Ka mihi atu rā kia tesi mā, mo te roanga atu o nā mahi kua pau te kaha. Ia rāta, ko te hua oe rā mahi, o puta mai ki wai mui a tātou i te rā. He hara ko i anake engari ko te tini o ngā kai kōreru i tuake i hora kōrero mai ai. Tēra, au nei, ka ruku tonu ki te kaupapa, ko te tūtai ki te wā. Mai rāno, ko te tūtai, ko te paratangata, tukuna ki roto i te whenua. Tukua ki roto i te whenua. Hei mahi mā papatuanuku. Taunua mai ki tēnei tāna, e pērā. Ko te whenua ia i ahu mai ai tā o te tangata. Te ane tapu tērā i poke ai i kūrā waka. Ka hanga mai rā ko te ira tangata. Wera i ki mai ai, i ahu mai rā tāu i te whenua. Ka hoki anō tāu ki te whenua. No tēnei āhuatanga o te tuku i te wai kia rere, te tuku i te tūtai me te para, ki roto i te wai, he mea rere ke tēnā. He mea hou. Kua reira, whakaarohi. Nā aha kua toru tau neke atu, te tūtai, te mimi, te aharai nei, e rere ana ki roto i te wai, doesn't mean it's right. Just because it's been done this long doesn't mean that it's right. It seems to me a situation of trying to smooth the pillow, if you know what I mean. But no, ka. Ka kore mātou e whakai, ki taua āhuatanga, kia tuku, te tūtai, te mimi, te haraini, ki roto i te wai. He patu tikanga, patu ngākai, karakau ana he oranga kai roto i taua mahi. Kareka. I'm just going to briefly translate that. So I come from Mangamuka. the hapu kai kōrero for te uri kōpuna. Also the whānau kai kōrero for the Pāti whānau of Mutu Kiore, just over there by the Narrows. We've lived there since before the treaty was signed. So no mui a kouta, no mui te karau, no mui te taunga mai o tērā ahutanga, o te kāwangatanga, neki. E tōkana mātou ki a kouta. Koreira ka mihi atu ki a kouta. The practice of discharging human waste into the waters is an alien and foreign practice to us. Our belief system holds that we, as people, are born of the earth. And so our whakapapa shows that. And when we die, we go back to that earth. And in all our glory, with all of our paru, and it goes into the earth, and there is purified and made and re-energized, revitalized, and the ora, the mauri, is recharged. So there's that. I'll just put that there. And I was saying, even though it's been 30 years and longer, that this practice of discharging into the harbour has been going on, doesn't mean it's right, and doesn't make it right. And I want to make that quite clear to you, the applicants. And you've got to find a way of actually doing something about that. You need to change your perspective. Your paradigm needs to change. You need to adapt to your environment rather than adapt your environment to your processes, your practices, and whatever it is that goes on with the national policy statements and legislation and all that sort of carry on. So now that we've come to that part where we talk about statutory arrangements and all that Rawene, I'm not going to talk much about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, because what I've got to say about that is far beyond the scope and beyond the confines of this hearing, of this forum. And so all I'm going to say is in terms of the principles that have been mentioned throughout the course of this hearing and proceedings before this hearing, they're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Where is the active protection? Where is the partnership? Where is the goodwill? Where is the good faith? Because if this is the best you can do, then you should move aside. Because this community has its own ideas. These are the people who live in this environment. Now you might be wondering, what's a chap from Mangamuka doing all the way down here? Well, I'll put it to you like this. E kore e wehea te orango te taia me te orango te tangata. Ko te orango te tangata, ko te orango te taia, ko tahi tonu. You cannot separate the welfare and the well-being of the people from the welfare and well-being of the environment. They are one and the same. And that's borne out in our cultural belief system and our cultural heritage that says that we are descendants of Rangi and Papa. And not just them, but the entire Taiao, this natural environment here, also play a part in the creation of our people and play a very important part in our humanity. And just on that last bit on the treaty, treaties are meant to be honoured and not settled. Okay, I'll put that there in the words of a mentor of mine, late Moana Jackson. The treaty is meant to be honoured and not settled. We object. We object to this application. We object to water discharge. Given that this is the age of opportunity and the age of technology, I cannot believe that waste discharge into the Moana It's the only technology out there for us to be using. So again, we object. Again, we object. E kore rawa mātou e whakai ki te rā, ki te tonora. Why? Ko te tino take? If I can use an English word, or a few English words actually, the desecration, the defilement, the destruction of our food sources, of everything that this moana represents to us, is not only obscene, it's repugnant. It's repugnant to our traditional laws, some of which you'll see displayed on my t-shirt here. It says, te reo, wairuatanga, whakapapa, kotahitanga, rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga, ukai-pōtanga, pūkengatanga, manaakitanga, whanaungatanga. So this practice of discharging into the harbour is repugnant to all of these things for all of these reasons. And we object. We object. We think that is, by far and large, it's up to you guys to come up with a land-based solution. And I'm really not, I'm quite dismayed to hear that the only constraints really seem to be financial. However, that's not really something that I need to come up with. That's not something I need to answer. Well, no, I think I runga I tērā. Much of what I wanted to share and wanted to say has already been mentioned throughout the course of the hearing by different presenters, different submitters. I'd just like to note, out of the 150 plus submissions, less than half a dozen, you could say 90% plus of those are objecting to the consent to the application. So I think koe anoi no, koe te nui ngā pē o ngā hōrero mō mātou, mō te uri kōpura me ngā pāti o Muzikiore. No reira mihi ana rā ki a tātou, mihi ana hoki rā ki ngā rangatahi. I te me mō rātou tēnei tāonga. Kai konei hoki rātou, whakarongo ana, mātaki-taki ana, and some of them made submissions. No reira e tātou mā, tēnei rātou mihi atu rā ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou koutou. Kia ora. Any questions? Kia ora, tēnā koutou.
Thank you very much, and for being succinct as well. I know there's a lot to say, and I really appreciate all submitters adding something new and not just repeating something. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You all right with the camera on? Do you want
Fluid in these kinds of languages, just go with it.
Yeah, just bring the microphone down so, yeah, close the mouth. That's it.
Don't hit it, case.
Is that working? Before I introduce myself, I just want to say this. With perseverance, hard work, discipline and dedication, I will continue to endure for the harbour. But I'm not alone because of my awesome whānau and friends. And practically everybody who has taken the time to come here today will continue with this mahi. I would like to acknowledge everyone in this room for coming to support all the speakers and of course our harbour, and I thank you all. I'm just going to fly into something, and I'm going to constantly flip in and out of qualitative and quantitative data because I have noticed that in the reports, I was lucky enough to be able to read the FNDC's proposal, and I know that they made mention that we may lack the ability to differentiate between the two. So I would like to give you some quantitative data, some qualitative first, that can be in the form of sharing stories and seeking to understand another person's perspective. It can be intuitive, and it has very little to do with data, which is quantitative. In the 1930s, over there, and not far from Pangaru, in a little place called Onoki, Venus family collected, if your place don't know who Venus Cooper, families collected seafood. Seafood was one of the most popular and cheapest fresh foods for the Māori people off the Hokianga. They caught flounder, mullet, kahawai, whitebait and snapper in the sea, and collected karahu, periwinkles, pippies and oysters from the shore. When my grandfather was a young man, each Christmas he would look forward to his family returning home, and they would camp along a sandy shore where the Rawene sewage ponds now are. And the waters there were safe for the children to swim, and there was plenty of land. And mullet. And I know this because it's summertime. He would lament. He would point to that location, and he would shake his head at that sewage pond, and he would say to me, "They did it on purpose." Okay, they did it on purpose. And and now I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in science from the University of University, which is very Western science-based, and it is in marine ecology. And if you're wondering what that is, I'll give you a real-life example, because a lot of people aren't sure what's a biologist, what's an ecologist. They are very similar in a way, but I'm going to give you a working example so you can figure out how I play a role in answering questions. So currently, 98% of juvenile snapper recruitment from the Kaipara Harbour come from the Kaipara Harbour, with only 2% coming from the Manukau Harbour. You'll have to bear with me. So snapper recruitment is the process by which young snappers settle into an area and establish a new generation of the species. They grow and then reproduce. As a marine ecologist, I would compare the populations and ask, why is the Waipara recruitment population higher than the Manukau recruitment population? And then I begin the process of creating data, in particular statistical data. I want to look at both environments and run the exact same tests in each, and I must do it in a manner where I have a method that can be followed by another peer. and when done will produce similar results to mine. That's peer reviewing. And at the end of my report, I'll talk about anything of relevance that perhaps I couldn't explain and the flaws in my method, and that may have affected the results. A basic one would be to look at seagrass. So I'd look at seagrasses because I know that from tons and tons of journal reports that we know that there is a relationship with juvenile snapper because they can hide in it, they can seek refuge from tides in it, and they can pretty much dodge bigger fish. These reports would show why this is important to young fish. And I'd want to look at populations of horse mussels. The reason why I do that horse mussels. I know, but I have to tell you why I like horse mussels. So when you're going in to try and build the idea, your approach, the information that you want to present, you have to read tons and tons of other people's methods, other reports, and so it's probably one of the most exciting parts about being a marine ecologist, and that's when you discover somebody else's work that's discovered something that we never knew about. But those horse mussels that you see in our harbours are so important to our little baby snapper, because when the tides become too strong, which is something that we need to be aware of in our estuary, in our harbour, is one of the main currents, the tidal currents, and these are quite powerful and they are affected by weather. So, you know, if you have your neap tides, well, it's not going to be so bad, and there's not much height difference, and then you'll have your spring when it can be up to 3 metres in difference. And when that happens, the speed of the water just goes crazy. But you'll find that little baby calfie will hide behind the water, will hide behind these horse mussels. So the presence of the horse mussel in the harbour is vital to their survivors, to the juvenile recruitment process. And that's only really, really new data. The reason why that is, if you want to get really freaky, it's called a Kármán vortex. And it's the way that the water moves around the mussel, allowing the fishes to find reprieve, rest, and to stay safe until the tides pretty much calm down. So as a marine ecologist, it would be my job to look at every single possible circumstance to find out what's going on with these two populations, and then be able to present the data using quantitative analysis and allow people to look at the results. And that's pretty much what I would be doing as a marine ecologist. I've also had the privilege of working for wildlands consultants in and around the Hokianga. And wildland provides specialist skills and project implementation in relation to ecology, biodiversity, and ecological restoration. I got to work on the assessment of the ecological effect of the proposed monitoring program for the Umanaya water treatment plant and the biennial monitoring of our Pataka stream in Umanaya. And so we were doing what we call an MCI, and that's a microinvertebrate community index, which is another quantitative data set that we use. And what we do is we look at the little light forms that are all in there. Generally, the ones that are responsible for breaking down detritus or eating leaves and things, and just by simply seeing who is present, we can work out how healthy a system is. The Pataka stream is incredibly healthy because it has something that would receive like 10 points in the MCI. 1 point means that you're really common and you're boring and you're probably in a really polluted place. 10 means that you are pristine, you are very rare, and that you are very susceptible to pollution. And so we have a sandy case caddis and a stonefly, and these are so rare, that the woman that works with us, Kate Senior, at Wildlands, actually, when we bring data back from our streams, she's never seen it before. So they get quite excited because they've actually never ever seen them before. So we have to bring out books and identify them, and we have to look at the bottoms of these flies. That, you know, they have anal gills and they breathe. And there's literally books looking at the bottoms of these little delicate creatures so that we can identify them. But that's just an aside. But the other thing is, I'd like to bring attention to, last night I received a legal submission by FNDC, and I read it carefully, and I'd like to touch on 7.2, the very last paragraph, where it says here that these applications nevertheless are worthy of grant consent, and that's all their reports and everything that they've put together. And the effects from a Western science perspective, this is why I'm really trying to make an important point here, that I understand what a Western science perspective is. I understand the importance of quantitative data when making decisions. And here they say that from a Western science perspective, that what is happening in the harbour are no more than minor. This really concerns me, because when I look at your reports that you have been given, your scope is rather narrow, and I'm going to show you how reports can be misinterpreted and are narrow, and that it's simply uneconomical and unfeasible in these small communities to cease discharging to the coastal marine area at the point in time. At this point in time, I've also had the luxury of working for an accounting agency called McRoy, Dutton Thompson, where I was trained exclusively in understanding contracts and managing logistical warehouses for, would you believe, golf equipment. Anyway, the expert reports have failed to take into account some very important quantitative data. And I would like to bring this to your attention. So we've had reports that large communities, for example, because you said that we are the smaller communities and that we can't afford things. And I think I know why. The larger communities, for example, Kiri, have been using the waste management plant in Rawene to dump their sewage via septic tank trucks into systems that were not designed to manage this. Now, if I was to consider the number of trucks, I'm starting to get some quantitative data here, that have used this resource over a period of 28 years for Rawene, then I would argue that our small communities have been taking on the responsibility of the larger, more economically viable communities' waste problem. We can quantify this data so that a price for the service can be rendered to any other larger communities that have benefited from the disposal method. And then I would need to extrapolate with the quantitative data 35 years into the future, aiming to predict how much more the service will be taken advantage of by the larger communities as their populations grow. And I'll also have to go back 28 years to look at the price that it has cost our smaller communities. And of course we need to quantify this data before they claim effects are no more than minor, and I would like to see that matter further investigated, because there's a cost involved there that's been missed. And that was part of my job, looking for costs that had been missed when I was working for my accounting people. And then once done, then we can look at the costing and whether the land-based options are by far the more feasible ones, and seek reparations from all the larger communities that have benefited from the smaller community wastewater treatment plants. That's just one. If you give me time, I'll find more. Now, I'm going to move in because I know that qualitative data, intuition, is probably doesn't seem to be listened to very well. So I've got to talk about something in the nature of a marine ecologist. So first of all, something deeply disgusts me when I read reports that speak about fecal matter and the levels that are acceptable before it's not acceptable. No fecal matter is the only acceptable application that our harbour deserves. You see, I see it like this: the moment someone decided what is acceptable and what wasn't was a huge miseducation. Miseducation means poor, wrong and harmful education. The moment that standard was introduced, it meant you could quantify how much you could abuse our harbour, how much the Hokianga could be used for convenience. So no report can justify how much you put into one of the most dynamic systems you will ever come across. Our harbour is a huge body of water, and when dealing with water, it's difficult to hold it still enough so you can snapshot it. And this is what I want to deal. A harbour is dynamic, which means it's constantly moving. The opposite of it is static. Static is still. Static is so easy to quantify. Static is so easy to study. But once you start getting something that moves, it's quite terrifying for ecologists, because we know that the data sets that we're going to have to get are going to be hard. And so you have if you can imagine, you have the container enclosing it, and gravity. So well, say if you have a cup of water. This is just a cup of water, not a harbour. It is by no means static. You have the container enclosing it. You have gravity acting on that container, holding it down. You have surrounding environmental changes in temperature, pressure and humidity. And you'll also need to consider the amount of water in the cup along with the size and shape. Now, just like our harbour, you need to consider the depth of the harbour, its size and the gravitational effects, the external environment changes, storms, winds, temperature, humidity, seasonal fluctuations, droughts, floods, and of course the different density gradients for salt and fresh water. So when I look at reports that are telling me about dilution in a dynamic harbour, I know that it is fraught with probably pretty average information. And before I go on and I say, they're talking about solution being a dilution, there are other quantitative ways to extract data from the harbour to find out just how much dilution is taking place. I'm not sure if anybody has spoken to you about the currents and what they do and the value to the ecosystem within this dynamic harbour of ours. Now, I'm only talking about the currents in our harbour and not the current that is just outside of our harbour, which is considered a convergence zone. I didn't read any reports about any of these other really important currents. So this is what I mean about the scope of the reports that we've been given. Now, I had the wonderful pleasure of attending a freshwater conference in Whangarei, and with the Te Wai Māori Trust to discuss our valuable, unique and beautiful taonga, our freshwater species. Many of them live their lives up in our streams and rivers and then head out into the oceans and return. There was a strong focus. This is the sort of report scopes that we should be aiming for in our harbour, so that the people that are making the decisions as to whether or not they want to continue putting pooping have these different types of quantitative data methods available, reports. And so there was a strong focus on understanding weather and oceans, currents, and global warming, and identifying species that are in danger now so we can mitigate and save them. So the reports that I read from the council are mainly to do with dilution being the solution and how well these currents are mixing. And that's a narrow scope. I would be looking at all the species around, I would be looking for habitat mapping. I'd want to know about the fish, I'd want to know about the shellfish in particular, and I'd want to be taking looks at benthic life forms. The shellfish are probably the most important, because from them we can look inside their stomachs and we can be filter feeders. And so they're going to be taken out of the water column, and they're going to have a whole lot of interesting things in their stomachs. They're going to have a whole lot of crap and really horrible things, probably. But we can then engage and figure out what this is, what is causing this, and is it influence from, is it our influence in their little stomachs? And I don't need to say, because you could send me out there and I could get the quantitative data and I could do it at a peer review level so that everybody can use the data. But also, the other thing is like the scope of reports. So when I spoke about the 98% recruitment rate in the Kaipara Harbour and the 2% recruitment rate in the Manukau Harbour, my knowledge is that there's also a recruitment rate in our harbour, and that report may have been, didn't take our harbour into, our harbour wasn't acknowledged. I don't know why that, but I could look into that report and find out exactly why. But I'd say that there is strong recruitment in our harbour. And so that's another reason why you've got to be careful when you look at reports. You've got to really be able to have eyes to see. And it's really good when you read reports with people that are really knowledgeable in the area, because then they can give you WhatsApps all the time. And I'm surrounded by those sort of people that I can call and show reports or ask them what would be a suitable method to approach. But all I can say right now is that the reports that have been given to us and are available, that you're making the decisions on, the scope's narrow, and I think that the decisions from that report, I want more. I definitely want more before I make the decision. From, of course, independent authorities, but then you could see some really amazing things. In our harbour, there's a lot of things missing, I know this. And we call it emergence. So emergence is when the unseen becomes seen. It's kind of difficult to understand, but I'll try and explain what it is. So when you take a termite alone by itself, it can't do much. But when you take a termite with a whole of other termites, it can suddenly build these huge towers, which have like, they're massive, and they're so well designed that they have like air venting ducts to keep them cool and things. And that's what you call emergence. That's when something on its own can't do much, but when you combine it, amazing things can happen. And that's what we're missing in our environment out there, because is we don't get to see the unseen anymore. And that's because our harbour is sick. And the difficult thing of that is, I can't give you proof of it till probably 20 years from now, because what we would have to do would be to go into our harbour and start making really wise decisions and bringing it back to its full potential, its full resilience. And then in 20 years' time, we could go down to the harbour, see all the things that were unseen, and then I could explain to you a little bit more about what emergence is.
Kia ora.
I'm done.
Kia ora. I don't have any questions for you, I'll just check for the question topic. Talking to a marine ecologist here as well, so
thank you. Thank you. I did not know that.
I didn't think I was the only one in the room yesterday, so welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for the heart. I'm not going to worry, but I can understand you. So kia ora.
Thank you. I had to keep it simple.
He toka hakari roki atu tonu mai ko. kakapatua ua tinire ngā kiwa Hokianga karuruku atua ki te toka iakiha, ki te toka mapuna e au e.
Kia ora.
Break, and then there was nobody. So we do have, yes, there, perfect.
And then Whaimana?
That's good.
Oh, okay.
No problem, just wanted to check where yesterday was a bit of a fizzer, we came back and there was nobody. So we'll break for a cup of tea, just on the bus room, come back at 3:30, thank you.
Going for a cup of tea, whānau. We'll be back at 3:30.